Hello everyone. So I thought I would make a video and show you guys how to work with coconut coir. And coconut coir is also called coco coir, and it is basically a renewable and sustainable alternative to peat moss. And I actually like to use coconut coir more than I like to use peat moss, because peat moss is really hard to get wet, and coconut coir is very easy to get wet and stay wet. And so in my seed starting mixtures and in my container mixtures, I choose to use half coconut coir and half peat moss. And I'll put a link somewhere around here or down in the description for the video I made about how to make my homemade potting mixture, because I think it's the bomb. But coconut coir, a lot of people don't even know what it is, let alone know how to work with it or what the differences are in the brands. And when you're using coconut coir for gardening, you want to make sure that you're looking for an OMRI listed organic coconut coir, preferably. Of course, if you're doing organic gardening. If you're not, then I guess you wouldn't worry about it. But most coconut coir that you can get is like pet bedding, like for lizards and stuff like that. And so they don't really take the extra time, most of the time, to take out the excess sodium, which can accumulate in the coir because of the way that they process the coconut husk. And that's what coconut coir is. It's the outer brown husk to the coconut. And that's why it's renewable and sustainable, because it's just a waste product normally. And so this turns a waste product into a very usable, friendly garden product, And so I get this brand called Cocotech, and I searched online to try to find a low sodium coconut coir, and this is the best one that I came up with. And this is 11-pound bale, so this is a really big package. And if you're doing a lot of container gardening like I do, you'll definitely want to look for this big package, and that's what it looks like out of the package. It's huge and much cheaper per ounce or per pound or whatever than the small bricks, which they also sell. But the small bricks are probably just that big. They might be like 1/5 or something the size of this huge brick. And it's okay if you're just doing a very small amount of gardening, but if you're doing several containers, especially if they're large containers, you'll probably just want to go ahead and look for this 11-pound bale. And really, it's not that expensive. It's because it's compact and it comes to you dry. And I couldn't find mine locally, so I had to order it online. And you can find it online for about $11 plus shipping. But that's still really not a bad price, considering that coconut coir is so versatile and so nice, and I really think it's worth it. I actually bought several packages of these because I do a lot of container gardening, and it cost me like $70 in shipping when it was all said and done, because that wasn't the only thing I got. But I don't know, I think it was worth it. And again, if you're just buying one or two, then obviously you're not going to pay $70 for shipping. And it would be nice if you could find it locally. Obviously, that would be your first choice. But this is a low sodium type. The mulch that I got is also a coconut coir, and it's the coarse grade type of coir, and it's by Hydro Farm. And I don't think that it was actually processed to take out the sodium. But I'm spending a lot of money in this garden, and while Cocotech makes a coarser grade mulching type of coir, it came in just in those little bricks that I was telling you about, and it would have been hugely cost prohibitive for me to be able to buy enough to mulch all of my raised beds. There's just no way. And also I use the mulch in my containers too, so on top of the mixture in the containers, so there's just no way. And so this is how you process your coir. It says to use 9 gallons of water, and I found that that's way too much. So I put 7 gallons of water in. And by now I pretty much know how much water I need to put in here, so I'm just going to take my hose, which I have a filter on my garden hose to take out the chlorine and everything, so I have good water to put in there. So I just take my hose and spray it in there until, you know, there's about how much I need. And but when you're first starting out, I would just fill up your watering can. That's a 2-gallon watering can. I would just fill that like a few times, and you know, you could start with 6 gallons and go to 7 gallons, and if you need to, you can obviously put 9 gallons in, but I feel it's just a waste of water because it's just way too wet and you don't need that much. It does not take that much to hydrate. Hopefully the hose isn't being too loud. But I usually spray it or pour it if I'm using the watering can. I'll just sit there and dump it right on the coir, and you can see it starting to expand. You can see the difference between the light and the dark. And so I'll spray the sides, and I'll spray the top. And it's pretty cool to watch, actually, because it just starts getting bigger and bigger. And especially with the mulch type of coir, the more you stir it, the faster it will break up. And actually the mulch type coir, it's just extremely easy to hydrate, because once you start adding the water, it starts breaking up immediately, and you can almost be done in just a matter of 10 minutes or less. Now with this stuff, it's a lot more compact, and so it actually does take a lot longer to separate and to hydrate. But if you take your big shovel or whatever and start breaking it up, you know, put your water in there, however much you're going to put in there, and then let it sit for a couple minutes, and then when you come back to it, you want to start breaking it up, because what you'll see is the top layer will be all puffy and ready to come off of there, and it'll just come off in like sheets. And so, yeah, you can see the top is already starting to hydrate. Hopefully it's not too sunny. There we go. It's a nice good spot. So that's your coconut coir. And so I'm going to go ahead and keep adding water, and I'll stir it a few times and get these layers broken up, because it's not ready to break up right now at all. But if this was the mulch, I would already start taking off huge chunks of the mulch, because it's just breaking up so easily. But this is going to take a lot longer. So I'll continue to add water and get this all hydrated, and then I'll show you later what it looks like when it's all hydrated. Okay? Talk to you later. Bye. So, I know I said I was going to break this thing up before I start videoing again, but I just wanted to show you how much it grew already, and it's only been about 5 minutes, but remember how short it was? And I didn't measure how much water I put in there, but it's not the full amount, but I got enough in there to get it started, and I'll just add more water as I need to as I go along. So I just wanted to show you that it's grown to almost twice its size by now. And if I don't start breaking it up and I just add more water, it will actually get even taller. But I find that if you stop now and start breaking it up, that it just works out a lot better, because for some reason, you know, that, well, because it's so compact, you know, the inside of it stays drier than the outside. And I forgot to mention that you definitely want to have a container big enough to do this in, because it gets really big. This is I think 7 cubic foot garden cart or whatever, so most wheelbarrows are half the depth, and I think it would fill up most wheelbarrows. It's supposed to expand to like 2 cubic feet, but I think it expands even more than that. And so you definitely want to make sure that you have enough room to do this in. And if you were doing the small bricks, I used to buy the small bricks before I found these, and one brick when put in a 5-gallon bucket, once it was totally expanded, it fills up a half of a 5-gallon bucket. So I think it's a great product, and it works really well for my purposes, and a little bit goes a long way. So I will come back when I've broken this up a bit and show you what it looks like about halfway through the process. Okay, so I took my little pitchfork, little miniature garden fork, and I broke it up so that you could see what it looks like. And this has only been about 10 minutes, and it's already pretty much halfway done. And what happened was I took my fork and just shoved it in there like halfway through the stack, and then just flipped it over. And the reason why I spray the top with the water rather than just filling up the bottom is because when you do that, it starts expanding at the top and on the bottom, and so the only thing you have really left to deal with is the inside. And so most of the water, you're still going to have excess water, and that's the kind of pain in the butt when it comes to working with coir, because you have all that extra water in the bottom, and your coir may actually be not close to the bottom, so it's not fully easy to work with it, but it's pretty darn easy. You just have to have a little bit of strength. But you can see that all this is expanded already. This came off the top, and then you'll have like little wafers that you'll need to submerge down in your water, which of course is at the bottom, and that's why I said it's not that easy, because when you're hydrating something this big, it's, I don't know, it's kind of a pain. But it's also really cool to watch it hydrate. And then this came from the center, and you can see it's just one thick whatever, and so and it's heavy. Hydrated coir is really heavy, and so I just take and move it out of the way. And actually, there is no water left in the bottom right now, and so I do need more water. But what I'll do is I'll take whatever dry parts I can find, and I'll sit them here on the bottom, and then I'll try to keep the hydrated stuff at the top. And then let me wipe my hand off. Nature's paper towel. So, and I knew I didn't add enough water, so I expected this actually. So I will go ahead and just spray it right on that huge chunk that's not hydrated. And I'm not going to spray the rest of that, because if I do, it's just going to be way, way, way too soggy, and you don't need it to be that wet, because just hydrating it with just enough water is fine. And when you go to use it in your potting mixes and stuff, it does a really good job of making the other ingredients moist so that they are not so light and fluffy, you know, the vermiculite and the peat. And I'm putting a little bit more than I need, because I'm going to go back through and take my shovel or whatever and just start getting the stuff from the bottom and just flipping it over, and I just want to make sure there's enough in there, and if there's too much I can drain it off. And I think that's about all I wanted to show you. I did want to mention for the mulch, when you're doing the mulch, that if you're not buying the Coco brand, if you buy like the Hydro Farm brand, which is the same size as that one, if you're buying the Hydro Farm brand mulch, you might want to hydrate it and then drain off the water, and then actually rinse down the coir mulch and let it drain off in case there's any extra sodium in it, because Hydro Farm does not, as far as I know, doesn't take out any of the excess sodium. I don't worry about it with this, but with any other brand, I would probably recommend rinsing it just to flush out that extra sodium, or as much extra sodium as possible. Okay, so when this is totally hydrated, I will come back one last time and show it to you. Okay, so the coir is all hydrated now, so I just wanted to show that to you, and so you can see just how much is here. They say it expands to about 2 cubic feet, and I think it's a little bit more than that, but it might be. I haven't measured it technically. I do know that after it's all said and done, you can probably fill up 3 or more 5-gallon buckets with just one of these bales. And so you can see that it's all wet. It's very wet right now. And if there is any dry parts in here, it's very small, and you could just go through and break that up. And there sometimes will be like bigger masses of the really thick hairs, you know. And so if you don't want to use that, if you're doing just seed starting or whatever, you want to either break that up or toss them out to the side or whatever. But you can see that it's all wet. I mean, it's very wet, and that'll help when you're going to make the potting mixture, the homemade potting mixture I showed you guys. It will help to moisten all the other ingredients, and that and the compost, the earthworm castings, those are wet as well, and so that will help when you're going to stir this stuff up. But you can see there's some fibrous, and you just break them up. And so I just used my pitchfork, and I turned it and turned it, just like, you know, it's making a cake or whatever. You want to get the stuff from the bottom, and more than likely there's no water left. I mean, I have to dig down quite a way, and it's heavy. Very heavy, and you can see it's very wet, and I can even wring it out. That's how wet it is, but there's no standing water in the bottom, so I did not add too much water. And if I would have added 9 gallons like they said, like I did the very first time I had one of these and expanded them, you would have a lot of extra water in the bottom, and that's just really not necessary. And so I would definitely use less water and add more, because you can always add more, but it's hard to take it away unless you want to tip your wheelbarrow over to the side and drain off the excess water. It's hard to take it away. And I wanted to show you the planting chips. Hold on here. I want to show you this mulch. This is also coconut coir, but it's not the Coco Tech brand. It is Hydro Farm, and you're not going to be able to see that because of the sun. Darn it. Is that better? Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, this is Hydro Farm, and it specifically says it's for mulch. Dirty fingernails now from digging in there. And they're called planting chips. It says it expands to 2 cubic foot. And like I said, this expands very fast, and you don't need as much water as they say. I think they say to use 7 gallons of water, and I think I used 5, maybe even less than 5. And the good thing about this stuff is once you start adding the water, it starts breaking up almost immediately. It only takes probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes top. If you're actively, you know, breaking up the chunks, it doesn't take more than 10 minutes to fully hydrate one of these, and you'll have excess water left over that you may want to drain, and you may want to rinse it as well if you're worried about the sodium, because this brand does not say that they take out any of the extra sodium, and because of the way they process it in brackish salt water, and so it can get pretty salty. And so if they don't specifically say that they've taken out sodium, or at least flushed it, then you can probably assume that you're going to have extra sodium in it. And I've planted quite a few things and put the unrinsed mulch on it because I forgot to rinse it the first time I expanded the mulch. I mean, I knew I should, but I forgot to do that. And I just went on merrily putting mulch on all my plants, and they don't seem to be responding badly to it. So I don't know if it's an issue or not. I guess I can really only be able to tell further on down the line, but the cucumbers and the melons have been underneath this mulch for 2 weeks, and the strawberry bed has had this mulch on it for probably 2 months, and I've used it in containers and everything else, and I haven't seen any detrimental effects. My pea plants aren't looking the greatest and I did use a small amount under the pea plants, but I grew peas last year and did not use the coir mulch, and they looked the same way. So I think it might be like a weather issue or something like that, because everything else is looking good. I mean, you probably can't see it from here, but the cucumbers are just exploding, and I just put them out like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, so I don't think it's hurting anything. Okay, so I think that was all I wanted to tell you on the coir, how to expand it, how much it makes. One of these bales of the fine coir will probably fill up 3 5-gallon buckets. I think I said that already. Sorry. I'm repeating myself now. And like I said, you definitely want to have the right tools for the right job, and the right containers. If you don't have a garden cart, obviously that's not going to be a point of contention. If you have a wheelbarrow, that will work just fine, because wheelbarrows are about half the size, but it will work. It's not that big of a deal. It's just that it might be overflowing out the top a little bit. If you don't have a wheelbarrow, well, then you might be out of luck because these are big. Now, if you're just working with the small bricks of coconut coir, you can put one of those in a 5-gallon bucket, which I have done because I used to buy the bricks before I found the bigger bales, and I would just put it down in there with the amount of water that they said, and that brick would expand all the way up to the top, and then I'd break it up, and it would end up filling half of the 5-gallon container. So it gets pretty big, and so you want to definitely have the containers that are going to fit it. You're probably going to want a wheelbarrow when you're doing the bales. And let's see, I think that was it. Oh, I used the hose water, but it has a filter on the end. I'm not sure if I mentioned that or not, but if you don't have a filter on the end of there and you do have rain barrels, it would be best to use your rainwater to hydrate your coir. If you want, you can use just regular straight tap water, but just keep in mind that it has a lot of crap in it that you may not want, and the plants may not appreciate having chlorine sprayed on them. So if you have to use tap water that's not filtered, you might want to fill up your bucket and let it sit out for a few hours to let the chlorine evaporate, just so that you're not putting chlorine in with your mulch or anything like that. Okay? Well, I think that was it. If you have any questions about coconut coir or coco coir, please let me know, and I'll try to answer them. Bye-bye.